one.
What's up? So, on today's edition, I want to be prepping a Texas style brisket. Many different styles. I'm going to show you how I do mine. Especially here in Texas, everybody has their own techniques. One of the first things you want to do is have you a nice, smooth brisket that is foldable. Okay, one that folds like that, that's going to be your tenderest cut. And you definitely always want to trim your brisket. There's a lot of fat on here that you need to get rid of for the simple fact the fat is unnecessary. You don't need to spend the extra time rendering the fat on the smoker. You get the fat out of the way, get more smoke, seasoning, and everything right directly into the meat. Although some fat is good and helps with flavoring and whatnot, but you don't want a very fatty brisket at the end of the day. You want to trim off as much of that as you can while maintaining a nice looking brisket. There's some small things like this end right here. See, we're going to trim this off. See, anything smaller, than I'd say about maybe a ½ inch, you want to go ahead and get rid of because it's just going to dry out. So that's the whole reason why we go ahead and we cut this off right here. We're going to just come around this corner here and just get rid of that tip there. And I know it looks like we're just wasting a lot of meat, but the end result is well worth it whenever you get into a little bit thicker meat right there, so you're not worried about that drying out and ruining your meat. This real hard fat like this here, this fat cap, you want to get rid of that. And basically you just go around the whole brisket, trimming it up. You want to make it look nice and presentable. Even if you're not cooking necessarily for a competition, but even if you're having guests over and buddies and whatnot, you still don't want your brisket to just look like trash. So we'll just set all this to the side, and I'll tell you what to do with that later. Let's see here, we're going to keep knocking this down until we get a nice looking edge that we are satisfied with here. Okay. Now, a lot of little chunks here, like so. This here. Now, we want us a nice, clean brisket. Don't rush this. Take your time. I mean, there's not really a wrong way to do it. I mean, there is, but the main thing is getting those low skinny points off and getting the big fat and the hard fat out of the way. So you want to thin this fat out as much as possible. So you got your nice healthy brisket here, and all the fun stuff you get to do with the fat. So you can save all this fat, you can actually boil it, render it down to beef tallow, and you can store that in a mason jar, and you basically have homemade frying oil. So it's kind of like saving bacon grease. Whenever you fry bacon, and you pour that bacon grease in a mason jar, keep it on the counter like us Southerners like to do, Well, same concept. You do want to strain it out though. It's one of the key differences. So you boil this fat and render it all down until it is as liquid as it can get. And once it reaches that liquid point, then you would strain it out and just store it up in a mason jar. Break it out to fry, whatever. Fried cornbread, fried fish, fried eggs, deep fried. So we are Now, what I go for mainly is once I get the fat kind of to the degree that I want it, the amount of fat that I want on this brisket, because remember, I want all that smoke. I don't want all that smoke and flavor to go into the fat that I'm going to trim off and throw away. Only so much of this fat gets cut up with the meat, because there is a process whenever you're cutting up the brisket, you throw a lot of this away. And you don't want to waste all that good, heavy smoke. You're going to be out there for 10, 12 hours or longer, depending on your style, smoking this, and you don't want all that to go to waste. So you reveal the meat so that you can get a lot heavier smoke and your flavoring more into the actual meat itself. But fat can be good also. So like, see this here, this is a lot of fat right here. And see, that's going to end up getting cut out. I'm going to leave that. Actually, I like that there. I'm going to leave it. That'll get cut out at the end after I cook. I think we're about ready to just make it more presentable now. So take your best knives for that, because now I'm done with all of that and I'm just doing a nice rounded edge here to make this puppy just look good, look nice and clean. So here we get rid of all that excess. Yeah, we come here, do it like this. Okay. So we basically are done trimming our brisket. Okay, I can live with that. So now our next step is going to be adding the binder. Now a lot of people have opinions on that. The purpose behind the mustard, you're not going to taste the mustard. It is not about flavor. The mustard is acidic. The mustard is going to kind of help break down and get that seasoning into the meat. It's got a vinegar into it. So when you get this good mustard base on this brisket, its primary purpose is to absorb smoke better and force it into the meat. And at the same time, it's going to hold your seasonings and your rubs onto your meat so that in the process of cooking, you do not lose all of your seasoning. So you spend all that time putting rubs and stuff on, putting in the work. You don't want half of your seasoning to fall off whenever the smoke hits it and it gets heated and you're out there flipping and turning and whatever your technique is. I try not to flip and turn mine too much. I like to let them sit there and smoke. So speaking of technique, made a mess of these gloves. So I'm gonna slide on some new gloves here. I just splashed my camera woman with mustard there. She's not happy with me. Kind of look like this brisket here. So now what we're getting ready to do is put on the seasonings. Now I'm going to show you, like I said, this is just a backyard brisket. This isn't necessarily competition style. This is, hey, you got some folks coming over. You want to hang out, have a good time. You want to throw something on the pit. This is going to be a good go-to. You're going to get a nice looking bark, flavor, tenderizing. It's going to be pretty simple to follow. I use your regular stuff you can get at the grocery store. Fiesta brand brisket rub, some seasoned salt, some trusty old black pepper. So we've got our mustard binder on. Do not be scared of too much seasoning. Remember, this is a thick chunk of meat. So you want to put the seasoning to it here. You know, get real heavy with it, especially the brisket rub. And I love that seasoned salt. You definitely want to have that salt on there. And I know some people, they don't rub their seasoning in, they just throw it on there. I don't have anything against that, but it's just not my style. I more or less like to kind of rub mine in. Take that time to make sure it's evenly mixed and cover all my edges and things like that. Some guys, they'll stand this brisket up, season the edges all the way around, get somebody to hold it up so they make sure they hit all the edges, and hey, that's great, more power to you, but you know, sometimes simple is best. So there, we got a good heavy coat on this side. Now, if you'll notice a spot that I forgot to mention there, I have this fat up right now, and there is a method to this madness. So now whenever I flip it over, my fat's down, and that's how this brisket's gonna stay. So I'm gonna season what I call my top side, call the fat side my bottom end, and I'll talk more about that in a second. So we're gonna get our good heavy covering on this side here. Do a little bit more brisket rub, just for kicks and giggles. All right. Now, the purpose of doing it the way I did it, with now the fat being down, is what I'm doing is marinating this tonight. See, this is going to go in the pit tomorrow morning, and it's going to smoke for probably about 8 to 10 hours, maybe a little longer. We'll see how the weather does and how the pit's doing tomorrow. But now we got a good, nice rub. Everything's marinated really good. The next step and final step in preparation, leaving that fat down, because what I do is, what I'll show you on my next video, is whenever I put that on the pit, I always put it with the fat down first. And for my first 2.5 to 3 hours, give or take, varies from brisket to brisket, I cook with the fat down, and then I'm going to flip that brisket, and I'm going to cook the rest of the time, the entire rest of the time. Rather, if it's 5-6 hours, the fat's going to remain up the entire time. I only flip my brisket one time, so I get all that smoke flavor into that fat, and then flip it up, and I let all that drain from the fat side down through the meat. And it just really helps with flavoring and tenderizing. Get you a good, nice pan like this. Your wife will thank you. You don't have to worry about messing up dishes. Put a lid on it. It's ready to go in the fridge. Marinate overnight. And then we'll be throwing this bad boy on in about 12 hours or so, getting it ready to go in that smoker. And I'll upload another video showing the outcome.